I'm Geraldine, 68 years old, and I built our family business from nothing alongside my late husband, Frank. Yesterday, my only son, Derek, looked me straight in the eyes and said those unimaginable words, "We don't have space for you. Get out." I packed my suitcase, walked away with my dignity intact, and smiled through my tears. What my son didn't realize was exactly what he'd lose by throwing away his mother. Before I share what happened when he woke up the next morning, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you believe families should never take each other for granted. I grew up in a small town called Lakeville in Michigan. It wasn't much, but it taught me the value of hard work and community. I met Frank during my sophomore year at community college where I was studying business administration. He was tall, hardworking, and had the kindest smile I'd ever seen. We married when I was 22, and we didn't have much to our names except determination and love. The early years were tough financially. We lived in a tiny apartment above a laundromat that always smelled like detergent and fabric softener. Frank worked construction during the day while I waited tables at night. We saved every penny we could, dreaming of starting our own business someday. It wasn't glamorous, but we were happy and had a clear vision for our future. 3 years into our marriage, we were blessed with our son Derek. He was a beautiful baby with Frank's eyes and my stubborn chin. Becoming parents changed everything for us. Our determination to build something meaningful doubled overnight. We wanted to create a legacy for Derek. When Derek turned 4, an opportunity arose to purchase a small, failing hardware store on Main Street. The previous owner was retiring with no succession plan. We used every dollar of our savings and took out a substantial loan to make it happen. Lakeville Hardware became our second child in many ways. We nurtured it, worried over it, and celebrated its small victories. Frank had a natural talent for customer service. He remembered everyone's names, their projects, even their children's birthdays. I handled the book's inventory and business strategy. We complemented each other perfectly. The store began to thrive within a few years. As Derek grew, Frank made it a point to involve him in the family business. Starting at age 10, Derek would help stock shelves on weekends. By his teenage years, he was working the register during summer breaks. Frank would patiently teach him about different tools, building materials, and most importantly, how to connect with customers. "The inventory is just stuff," Frank would tell him. "It's the relationships that build a business that lasts." I'll never forget how proud Frank looked when 17-year-old Derek helped a first-time homeowner select the right materials for a deck project. It was clear our son had inherited his father's way with people. Derek went to State University and studied business, coming home every break to work in the store. Our plan was always for him to eventually take over the family business. Life had other plans. Frank complained of indigestion one Sunday morning. By afternoon, he was gone. A massive heart attack took him at 59. Derek was 25 at the time. The loss was devastating for both of us. Frank had been the heart of our family and the face of our business. I was 55 when I became a widow. After the funeral, I had to decide whether to sell the store or try to run it myself. Derek had just started a promising job with a marketing firm in the city, but when he saw me struggling, he made the decision to come home. "Dad would want us to keep it in the family," he said. "We'll run it together." Those first years after Frank's death, Derek truly was my partner and support. We grieved together while expanding the business. We opened a second location in the neighboring town and modernized our inventory system. The locals continued to support us, many sharing stories of how Frank had helped them over the years. I thought Frank would be proud of how we were carrying on his legacy. Derek met Stephanie at a regional business conference 5 years after his father passed. She was striking with her perfectly styled blonde hair and designer clothes. Her family owned a chain of high-end furniture stores in the state capital, and she worked in their corporate office handling marketing and finance. Derek was immediately smitten. When he first brought Stephanie home to meet me, I noticed how her eyes assessed our modest home, the furniture Frank and I had saved for the family photos on the walls. She was polite, but distant. When Derek proudly gave her a tour of our hardware store, she smiled thinly and mentioned several times how quaint and old-fashioned everything was. I tried not to take offense, reminding myself that she came from a different world. Their courtship was brief and intense. Within 8 months, Derek proposed with a ring that must have cost him 3 months' salary. I expressed gentle concern about the expense, but he brushed it off. Stephanie deserves the best mom, he said. Besides, the business is doing great. The wedding was far more lavish than anything we'd ever done in our family. Stephanie's parents contributed, but Derek insisted we pay our fair share, which stretched my finances considerably. I dipped into my retirement savings to help wanting Derek's day to be special. The ceremony was at a vineyard estate with 400 guests, most of whom I'd never met. I felt out of place in my new dress that Stephanie had helped me select repeatedly, telling me my usual clothes were too casual for mother of the groom. After the honeymoon, subtle changes began in Derek's attitude toward the business and toward me. Stephanie had opinions about everything: our store layout, our marketing, our vendor relationships. Despite having never worked a day in hardware retail, she spoke with absolute authority. Derek, eager to impress his new wife, began implementing her suggestions without discussing them with me first. "Mom, we need to attract a higher-end clientele," he explained when I questioned the sudden price increases on our basic items. "Stephanie says we're leaving money on the table." Our longtime customers noticed, and some began taking their business to the big box store on the highway. Just over a year into their marriage, Stephanie became pregnant with twins. I was overjoyed at the prospect of grandchildren. During Stephanie's pregnancy, I knitted blankets, bought books, and prepared the spare room in my house for when they might visit with the babies. Stephanie accepted my gifts with cool politeness, but made it clear that a professional decorator would be handling the nursery. Madison and Mason were born healthy and beautiful. I fell in love the moment I held them. Being a grandmother gave me a new purpose after losing Frank. I offered to watch the twins regularly so Derek and Stephanie could have date nights or just rest. "That's thoughtful, Geraldine," Stephanie said, "but we've already interviewed nannies." I was allowed scheduled visits, always under Stephanie's watchful eye. When the twins were 6 months old, Derek and Stephanie announced they were buying a 5-bedroom house in Oak Ridge, the most exclusive neighborhood in the county. The house was enormous, with cathedral ceilings, a 3-car garage, and a backyard that backed onto a private golf course. "It's a bit of a stretch financially," Derek admitted when showing me the listing, "but Stephanie says it's important for our image and the kids deserve space to grow." I offered to help with the down payment, wanting to support my son and be closer to my grandchildren. I wrote a check for $75,000, nearly depleting what remained of my personal savings outside the business. Derek accepted it with casual thanks, as if it were expected rather than an extraordinary gift. After moving into the new house, their lifestyle became increasingly lavish. Stephanie drove a new luxury SUV. They took expensive vacations, posting photos from resorts in Bali and the Maldives. Derek began dressing exclusively in designer clothes and talking about the people they were meeting in their new social circle. Meanwhile, I noticed concerning changes at the store: inventory orders were being missed, longtime employees were quitting, and customer complaints were increasing. The first major business disagreement came when Derek decided to reduce our community involvement. For 30 years, we had supported the local Little League high school shop classes and community events. "Those sponsorships don't generate enough return," Derek explained, using phrases that sounded like Stephanie. "We need to be more strategic with our marketing budget." I reminded him that community goodwill had sustained us through economic downturns when bigger competitors struggled. "That's old school thinking, Mom," he replied dismissively. "Stephanie's family never bothers with small-town sponsorships, and their business is 10 times our size." Family dinners became increasingly uncomfortable. Stephanie would talk at length about their country club memberships, their friends' accomplishments, and the exclusive preschool where they'd already secured spots for the twins, though they were barely 1 year old. When I tried to contribute to conversations, I was often cut off or met with blank stares. "Mom, nobody cares about Mrs. Johnson's garden renovation," Derek said once after I mentioned helping our elderly customer select appropriate soil and plants. Stephanie smirked. I felt foolish and small, as if my life's work was trivial. When I turned 68, they arrived 45 minutes late to the birthday dinner I had prepared. Derek explained unapologetically that their personal trainer had extended their session. They stayed barely an hour, Stephanie checking her phone constantly, while the twins fussed in their designer outfits that couldn't be wrinkled or stained. They didn't bring a gift or card. When they left, Derek said, "Next year we should just meet at a restaurant. It's easier for everyone." I washed dishes alone that night, missing Frank more than ever. The following week, I discovered that Derek had signed a contract for a major renovation of our original store location without consulting me. When I confronted him in his office, he was defensive. "Mom, I don't need your permission for every business decision. I'm the one with the vision for our future. This is still a partnership, Derek. I own 51% of this business." His face flushed. "Maybe that's the problem. You can't let go of control. Stephanie says, I don't care what Stephanie says. She's not part of this business. She's my wife and she has an MBA mom. Her input is valuable." Later that afternoon, I tried to access our business financial accounts and discovered my password had been changed. When I asked our bookkeeper about recent transactions, she appeared nervous and said Derek had instructed her to report directly to him. I also noticed that important documents were missing from the filing cabinet in my office. That evening, I called our business attorney, who seemed uncomfortable speaking with me. After some pressing, he admitted that Derek had consulted him about restructuring the business ownership, but wouldn't provide details citing client confidentiality. I reminded him that I was his primary client as majority owner. He promised to review the situation. The next day, Derek was coldly professional at work, avoiding my questions about finances. He referred to me as Geraldine when speaking to suppliers on the phone rather than my mom or my partner, as he had always done before. I felt like a stranger in the business I had built. Winter came early that year. I caught pneumonia after working long hours trying to sort through the business concerns. The doctor insisted I go to the hospital when my fever wouldn't break. I spent 5 days there, mostly alone. Derek visited twice briefly, focusing more on his phone than on me. Stephanie didn't come at all, sending a generic "get well" text message instead. When I returned home, still weak and tired, I discovered that my bedroom had been converted into a home gym. My clothes and personal items had been moved to the small guest room at the end of the hall. "We thought it made sense while you were gone," Derek explained without meeting my eyes. "The guest room is cozier for you, and we needed a workout space now that our schedules are so busy." Stephanie added, "The guest room is more your style anyway, Geraldine. Simple." I said nothing, too stunned and exhausted to argue. That night, I overheard them arguing in their bedroom, not bothering to lower their voices. "Your mother can't live here forever," Stephanie said. "The twins need that room for a play space, and frankly, she's bringing down the whole vibe of the house with her fussy old lady habits." "What do you expect me to do?" "She's my mother." "Figure it out, Derek. Assisted living exists for a reason. She's becoming a problem." A problem. After everything I had sacrificed, I was now a problem to be solved. I lay awake all night, my chest tight with more than just pneumonia. The next morning, I tried to discuss future living arrangements calmly over coffee. "I understand that you need your space," I began. "Perhaps we could look at some options together." Derek avoided the conversation. "Not now, Mom. We've got that dinner with the Richardsons tonight, and I need to prepare some talking points." The dinner. Another networking event with Stephanie's country club friends. I wasn't invited, of course. I spent the evening with my grandchildren and the nanny, treasuring the rare time alone with Madison and Mason. When Derek and Stephanie returned, clearly intoxicated, I was sitting in the living room looking through a family photo album with the sleeping twins beside me. "Why are they still up?" Stephanie demanded, her words slurring slightly. "It's hours past their bedtime." "They fell asleep here," I explained. "I didn't want to wake them." "This is exactly the problem," she hissed at Derek. "No boundaries, no respect for our rules." Derek's face hardened as he looked at me. Something in his expression reminded me of a tantrum he had thrown as a 3-year-old when he couldn't get his way. But now he was a grown man, and his childish selfishness cut deeper. "We need to talk, Mom," he said stiffly. Stephanie took the twins upstairs while Derek paced the living room. "This isn't working," he finally said. "Stephanie and I need our space. The kids need structure." "I understand," I began. "I can start looking at apartments nearby." He cut me off. "The thing is, Mom, this area is really expensive. The kind of place you'd want would eat up all your retirement. It makes more sense for you to move back to Lakeville. The cost of living is lower there." Lakeville was 3 hours away. I would rarely see my grandchildren. "But what about the business?" I asked. "I've got it handled," he said dismissively. "You should enjoy your retirement. You're getting older and the stress isn't good for you." I felt my throat tighten. "Derek, That business is my life's work. Your father and I built it from nothing. Dad's been gone for 8 years, Mom. Things change. We need to move forward. We can move forward together, I insisted. There's no reason I can't have my own place nearby and still be involved in the business. His face flushed dark red. He stood up suddenly, towering over me. You want the truth. We don't have space for you. Not in this house, not in the business, not in our lives. Get out. The words echoed in the high-ceilinged room. I saw Stephanie standing at the top of the stairs, a satisfied smirk playing on her lips. Worse, Madison stood beside her, clutching her blanket, eyes wide with confusion at her father's shouting. The pain was physical, like being stabbed, but I wouldn't let them see me break. 68 years had taught me something about dignity. I see, I said quietly, standing up. If that's how you truly feel, I'll go first thing tomorrow. Don't bother waiting until tomorrow, Derek spat. You can pack tonight. I walked upstairs past Stephanie without a word. In the small guest room, I sat on the edge of the bed, allowing myself exactly 5 minutes of silent tears before I began to pack. As I folded clothes into my suitcase, my hands trembled, not just with emotion, but with resolve. The disrespect I'd just experienced crystallized something I'd been avoiding for months. Derek had changed fundamentally, and it was time I protected myself. I reached into my purse and removed a small key that opened the lockbox I'd kept hidden in the closet. Inside were the original business documents, property deeds, and the updated will Frank and I had created after Derek was born. I reviewed them carefully, confirming what I already knew. Despite Derek's attempts to sideline me, I remained the majority owner of Lakeville Hardware and its second location. More surprisingly, I discovered that the deed to Derek and Stephanie's grand house was still partially in my name, as the loan officer had required my signature as a guarantor given the size of my down payment contribution. At midnight, I called Margaret Williams, my personal attorney for 20 years, and one of my closest friends. Unlike our business lawyer, Margaret's loyalty was exclusively to me. She answered, despite the hour. Jerry, are you all right? Her voice was alert with concern. No, Maggie, I'm not, but I'm about to be. Can you meet me tomorrow at 8? Of course. Your place. No, I replied. The Sunrise Motel off Highway 16, room to be determined. I'll text you. Jerry, what's happened? I'll explain tomorrow. Bring all my personal legal documents. And Maggie, absolute discretion on this one. Always. Get some rest. I finished packing just the essentials. Clothes, medications, personal mementos, and crucially, all my important documents. I wrote a note for the twins telling them Grandma loved them very much and would see them soon, and slipped it into Madison's favorite storybook where Stephanie wouldn't find and destroy it. Before dawn, I called a taxi rather than using a rideshare app that might be tracked. As the driver helped with my bags, I took one last look at the house. Despite everything, tears welled in my eyes. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. The Sunrise Motel was modest but clean. I checked in under my maiden name, paid cash for 3 nights, and collapsed onto the bed. An hour later, I met Margaret in the small, attached diner. Her eyes widened as I recounted the previous night's events and Derek's behavior over the past few years. That little ingrate, she muttered. After everything you've done. I don't want revenge, Maggie, I clarified. I want justice and protection. Derek needs to understand there are consequences to treating family like disposable assets. Margaret's legal mind kicked into high gear. First, we secure your financial independence, then we address the business. The house is actually the easiest part. We spent the morning reviewing documents and making calls. By noon, I had changed the signatories on my personal accounts, filed preliminary paperwork to formally assert my majority ownership of the business, and initiated the process to claim my interest in the house Derek thought was entirely his. At 1 o'clock, my phone buzzed with Derek's text. Where are you? The nanny needs to know about the twins' schedule. The message confirmed he hadn't even noticed my absence until it affected his convenience. I replied simply, I respected your wishes and left. The nanny has my number if she needs anything regarding the children. Margaret squeezed my hand as tears slipped down my cheeks. He'll realize what he's done, Jerry. Maybe, I replied, but I won't be holding my breath. That night in the motel room, I allowed myself to fully grieve. I cried for Frank, who would have been heartbroken to see what our son had become. I cried for my grandchildren caught in the middle. I cried for the decades of love and sacrifice that had been dismissed so cruelly. But by morning, my resolve had hardened. Margaret arrived with a notary public, and I signed the final documents needed to reclaim what was rightfully mine. Within hours, the ownership assertions were formally filed, new locks were ordered for the business, and bank access permissions were updated. "Are you sure about this?" Margaret asked one final time. I thought of Derek's cold eyes as he told me to get out. "Absolutely," I replied. Sometimes, love means setting boundaries and teaching hard lessons. Derek's day began like any other Tuesday. He showered in his luxury bathroom, dressed in his expensive clothes, kissed his children absent-mindedly as the nanny handled their breakfast, and barely acknowledged Stephanie as she typed furiously on her phone. He didn't notice my absence until he checked his messages and saw a notification from his email. Subject: legal notice of ownership assertion. His coffee cup froze halfway to his lips as he read the formal notice from Margaret's law firm detailing my majority ownership of Lakeville Hardware and its assets, the immediate suspension of his executive authority pending review of potentially improper financial actions, and the freezing of business accounts to prevent further unauthorized transactions. "What the hell?" he muttered, scrolling frantically through the document. A second email appeared. Notice of property interest. This one detailed my legal claim to 30% ownership of their house, based on my down payment contribution and status as loan guarantor. His phone rang. It was Ted from the bank. "Derek, there's an issue with the business accounts. All withdrawal permissions have been changed. We can only accept transaction authorizations from Geraldine Peterson at this time." Derek's face paled. "There must be some mistake." "No mistake," Ted replied uncomfortably. "The paperwork is in order. Your mother submitted everything properly through her attorney." As reality dawned, Derek rushed to get dressed. "I'm going to the store," he barked at Stephanie. "My mother has lost her mind." "What's happening?" Stephanie demanded, sensing his panic. "Nothing, just a misunderstanding about the business." He jumped into his luxury car and sped toward Lakeville Hardware. Upon arrival, his key no longer worked in the front door. Through the glass, he could see Jim, their longtime manager, speaking with a locksmith. Derek pounded on the door. "Jim, let me in." Jim approached reluctantly, opening the door just enough to speak through the gap. "I can't, Derek. I've got strict instructions from Geraldine. She's reassumed operational control effective immediately. This is ridiculous. I run this business." "Not according to these papers," Jim said, showing him the formal notice. "And frankly, after seeing how you've been treating your mother, I'm not inclined to go against her wishes." Derek's phone buzzed again. Stephanie. "Derek, there's a woman here from some law office. Something about our mortgage and property deed. What is going on?" The reality of his situation began to sink in. He had pushed too far, assuming his mother would always be the selfless provider she'd been his entire life. He'd never imagined she would actually stand up for herself. He drove to the second store location with the same result. By noon, his phone was exploding with messages from Stephanie, their bank, their mortgage company, and various business contacts. Each message confirmed the same thing: Geraldine Peterson was reclaiming what was rightfully hers. When he returned home, he found Stephanie in a state of fury. "Your mother is trying to take our house," she shrieked. "How could you let this happen?" "You said the business was secure." I thought it was," Derek stammered. "She's still the majority owner on paper, but she hasn't been involved in operations for years. I didn't think she'd ever actually exercise those rights." "You didn't think—" Stephanie's voice rose to a dangerous pitch. "That house gym we built in her room cost $40,000. The country club membership is due next week. The twins' private school deposit is non-refundable." As Stephanie ranted about their financial predicament, neighbors walking past could hear every word through the open windows. The perfect image they'd cultivated was cracking rapidly. By evening, Derek was desperate. He'd called my phone 20 times with no answer. Finally, he received a text message with an address, the Sunrise Motel. 30 minutes later, he pounded on my door, his expression a mix of rage and panic. I opened it calmly, stepping aside to let him enter. The modest room with its faded curtains and simple furnishings was a stark contrast to the luxury he'd become accustomed to. "What are you doing, Mom?" he demanded. "This is insane." "Is it?" I replied evenly. "You told me to get out, that there was no place for me in your home, your business, or your life. I simply took you at your word and protected myself accordingly." "But the business, the house," he sputtered. "The business that your father and I built from nothing. The house that my $75,000 helped you buy." "Yes, what about them?" Derek collapsed into the room's single chair, the arrogance draining from his face. "You can't do this to me." "I'm not doing anything to you, Derek. I'm doing something for myself, setting boundaries that should have been set long ago." "Stephanie is furious," he said, as if this might sway me. "I imagine she is. She's grown accustomed to spending money she didn't earn and disrespecting the person who provided it." For the first time, I saw a flicker of shame cross my son's face. "So what now? You're just going to take everything away?" "No," I said gently. "That would make me no better than you. What happens next depends entirely on you." He looked up, a glimmer of the little boy I'd raised visible beneath the entitlement he'd developed. "What do you mean?" "I mean it's time for some changes, starting with how you treat me and continuing with how you run the business your father was so proud of." I sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted by the weight of it all. "I never wanted it to come to this, Derek. All I ever wanted was to be treated with basic respect and to preserve what your father and I built." In the silence that followed, I thought I saw the first real understanding dawn in my son's eyes. The journey toward healing our relationship didn't happen overnight. After our confrontation in the motel room, Derek returned home to a furious Stephanie. According to Jim, who remained loyal to me, their argument was explosive. Stephanie had built her identity around wealth and status, and the threat to her lifestyle was intolerable. "You fix this, Derek," she had demanded. "Get your mother to back down or I'm taking the twins to my parents." When Derek failed to immediately resolve the situation to her satisfaction, Stephanie made good on her threat packing bags for herself and the children. She left him with an ultimatum: either regain control of the business and house within 30 days, or she would file for divorce. Derek called me the following morning, his voice ragged from a sleepless night. "Can we talk? Really talk?" We met at a small coffee shop halfway between the motel and his house. He looked disheveled, humbled, and for the first time in years, honest. "I don't know how we got here," he began. "Everything happened so gradually." "It always does," I replied. "Changes that dramatic rarely happen all at once." For 2 hours, we talked openly about the past few years. Derek admitted that Stephanie's lifestyle expectations had created enormous financial pressure. He'd been making increasingly risky business decisions, trying to generate enough profit to sustain their standard of living. "The business wasn't designed to support that kind of excess," I explained. "Your father built it to provide a good, sustainable living while serving the community." Derek nodded slowly. "I know, I just got caught up in it all. Stephanie kept talking about her family's success, their connections, how we needed to project the right image." "And where has that left you?" I asked gently. He looked down at his coffee cup. "Alone in a big house I might lose with the business in jeopardy, and a wife who's conditional in her commitment." I reached across the table and took his hand. "Not entirely alone." We developed a structured plan for moving forward. I would return to active management of the business temporarily, while Derek took financial counseling and business ethics courses. All major decisions would require joint approval. The company would return to its community-focused values, rebuilding relationships with the local customers we'd neglected. Regarding the house, I agreed not to force a sale if Derek could refinance to remove my liability. The home gym would be converted back to a bedroom that would be mine whenever I visited my grandchildren. "And what about Stephanie?" Derek asked hesitantly. "That's between you and her," I replied honestly. "But any relationship built on materialism rather than mutual respect will always be fragile." Stephanie returned briefly when Derek explained our arrangement, but the damage was done. Their relationship, already strained by her disappointment in his failure to secure their lifestyle, couldn't recover. 3 months later, they began divorce proceedings. Derek faced the challenge of becoming a single father with grace I hadn't expected. He moved out of the oversized house that had become a symbol of their misplaced values and into a comfortable but modest four-bedroom home closer to the original hardware store. I helped with the twins several days a week, but maintained my own apartment nearby, preserving my independence while strengthening family bonds. Rebuilding trust was a slow process. There were setbacks and difficult conversations. Sometimes Derek would slip into old patterns of dismissiveness, and I would need to firmly reinstate boundaries. But gradually, genuinely, our relationship healed. The business flourished once we returned to Frank's original vision, focusing on exceptional customer service and community investment. Several loyal customers who had left during the high-end experiment returned, bringing new customers with them. We expanded thoughtfully, adding a contractor supply division that served a real need in the community. Most precious to me was watching Derek rediscover his relationship with his children. Without Stephanie's rigid scheduling and status-conscious parenting, he became more present and playful with Madison and Mason. I treasured moments watching him teach them to ride bikes in the park or helping them build a treehouse in the backyard, echoing how Frank had mentored him all those years ago. On what would have been Frank's 70th birthday, Derek and I closed both stores for the day and took the twins fishing at the lake where we used to have family picnics. As the children napped in the afternoon sun, Derek turned to me. "I understand Dad better now," he said quietly. What he was trying to build, what really mattered to him. "What matters to you now?" I asked. "This," he gestured to the sleeping twins, to the peaceful lake, to me. "Family, legacy, not the fancy house or expensive car, but something real and lasting, something the twins can be proud of someday." I smiled, feeling Frank's presence all around us. He would be so proud of the man you're becoming. Later that evening, as I prepared to leave Derek's house after dinner, Madison tugged on my skirt. "Grandma, are you going to go away again?" I knelt down to her level. "No, sweetheart. Grandma has her own house now, but I'll always be nearby. I promise." She threw her small arms around my neck. "Good. Daddy needs you. He said so." I looked up to see Derek watching us, nodding slightly in acknowledgement of this simple truth. The journey had been painful but necessary. In demanding respect, I had given my son the opportunity to become a better man than he had been. In standing firm, I had ultimately helped him stand stronger. And in refusing to be cast aside, I had shown my grandchildren the value of self-respect and forgiveness. Family isn't about blind sacrifice or endless giving until you're empty. It's about mutual respect, contribution, and love that holds firm even through life's harshest lessons. Sometimes the greatest act of love is setting boundaries that allow others to grow through consequence. If you're facing a situation where your contributions are being taken for granted, remember that teaching others to respect you is ultimately a gift to them as well. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe and hit that like button. Your support helps me continue sharing these life lessons from my journey. Thank you for listening, and remember, it's never too late to stand up for yourself with both strength and grace.